what stands out the most about Brayden Loftin to you, DY?
You said it. It's those athletic and testing numbers. I think he has a 10.4 broad jump recorded, as well as a 4.6 hand time 40. Now he's only about 205, 210 at the moment. So you're going to have to tack on at least 25, 30 pounds and hope most of that stays. That's why you kind of have to project the talent and kind of how Kansas State builds their classes. And some of the others don't. They can take that kid to already test that way at 235, 240. Kansas State has to find the kid that's maybe can do that in a couple of years, and that's where they see Loftin as well.
So is it fair to put him in the same category as like Osunsanmi and who did we just talk about last segment? Stinger? Is it fair to put them in the same kind of category?
Yeah, I would. Now, Tobi might be a guy that I would put above Tobi Osunsami, the linebacker at Wichita East that they added. He might be in a little bit of a different category just because his testing numbers are even a little bit better. He is probably going to be one of the finer athletes that they've landed in general since they took over in Manhattan. That's how athletic he is. Now he's very raw. He doesn't really know what he's doing in terms of playing the position yet. So that's going to be a job for Steve Stannard. But in terms of what he can do athletically, the job is a big one for Coach True in the weight room or from a speed or explosive perspective, because Tobi Osunsami comes in with those traits already collected.
Well, I love hearing you say that because I love the idea of taking as many of those kids as you can right now, because I think like the way that you get high level, like NFL caliber athletes here in this program, to me, there's really two routes. And it's to take kids like that, take kids like Daryl Jones from a couple of years ago that remember you saying the same sorts of things about, and then the transfers, right? The Riley Moores, Daniel Matterbebes of the world that have that kind of skill level, Julius Brents, obviously as well. Is Osunsanmi, I keep making these comparisons, but like the first thing that popped into my mind when I heard how you were describing him is like Daryl Jones, which is to me the type of comp there. They obviously don't play the same position, right? But from a skill set standpoint, development standpoint, are they in the same ballpark?
Yeah, I would say so, because they're both just so gifted from an athletic standpoint, but also so far away from probably being able to contribute and see the field. So one's a corner, one's a linebacker, but same kind of thing. There was a point a couple of weeks ago, and maybe I shouldn't have went that far, but I call Tobi Osunsami kind of the diet Jaren Kanak. Now, Osunsami actually has more length than Kanak, but in terms of just the explosive and athletic and testing numbers, they're pretty similar. Kanak is maybe he is a little bit more than that, even than Osunsami, and probably is a little bit more filled out because he has a little bit of a smaller frame and he has more weight to him, and he's still doing what he's doing. But those two, I'm going to be interested to see how the paths of those two careers end up, because it's funny how one recruitment looks completely different than the other, but athletically they're pretty similar. And though I would say Kanak had a little bit more polish to his game, it's not like he had a spectacular junior film either.
Well, yeah, that's like what I'd always heard about Kanak. His film really left a lot to be desired just because he is so raw, and maybe there's something there with the Hayes coach and how he's being utilized too. But I didn't think he had very good film. So, like, what is the difference? I guess is it just an exposure thing? How is it that Tobi was so much more slept on?
Yeah, I think some of it is an exposure thing. There's certain things in recruiting that sometimes don't always make a whole lot of sense, because there's not a huge difference between Tobi Osunsami and Jaren Kanak. Neither one has really great junior film. Kanak maybe could have had junior film, but the fact is that if he was utilized in a way that I would have utilized him, but the fact is he doesn't. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference to the recruiting profile between a Jaren Kanak and a Tobi Osunsami, to be quite honest. Now, Kanak is probably not as raw and he's a little bit more filled out, but everything else is pretty much identical, except Osunsami actually even has more length.
Is there a fear then that Osunsami really blows up this year?
I mean, it's potential. If you see the way Jaren Kanak blown up, that it could happen, especially if he has really good senior film, because it's interesting, because I think Jaren Kanak blew up because of his testing numbers, and his testing numbers are the same as Osuns. Like I said, some things in recruiting will always make sense, and because there's guys that look very similar, but the recruits take a completely different path, and this is one of those examples, which is why I'm going to be curious how those two careers pan out.
Now, the other thing with Osunsami, and Derek Young is talking with me, by the way, from KSO. The other thing with Osunsami is the connection that he has to Dylan Edwards and Avery Johnson, having played some 7-on-7 ball with them. Never going to hurt, right? How much do you think it helps K-State in the recruitment of those two?
Yeah, I mean, having more familiarity for those two is always going to be a good thing. So having him in the locker room, at Kansas State, being able to be around when those two, visit however many times they do, and being able to reveal to them how much he enjoys it, hopefully that he is enjoying it, when he arrives, next year, then that's just another carrot that they can dangle when recruiting, Dylan Edwards and Avery Johnson. And make no mistake about it, that's going to be the spotlight probably for the next, 6 to 8 months, is how Kansas State is faring with those two, because that's going to have a lot of eyeballs on it.
Derek Young chatting with me here about K-State football recruiting. Just to close the book on Brayden Loftin, it didn't seem like there was a lot of competition right now from major schools like P5s. Is that something you could see developing down the road, or is this going to be another recruit that is fairly under-recruited relative to as far as the competition level is concerned?
I tend to think that it could always happen, especially with good senior tape. But here's the thing, too, because of the rise of the transfer portal, I mean, there's going to be so many programs that are just not looking at kids or in their senior year, because they probably, if they have 10 to 15 or around 15 commits already, then those are initial counters. They only get 25 at most. So they have to be very frugal with how they do it. So many teams might be kind of filled up or have enough spots occupied that even if they were to kind of have their head turned by Loftin at a later date, you have to wonder, can they fit them in? Because so many teams are going to be, reserving so many spots for transfers. I mean, even I think Purdue, which I wouldn't think is a big transfer destination, but I shouldn't say that. But I mean, they added. It's funny because Gene Taylor told you Chris Klein's saying maybe 10 transfers a year, and everyone, even me initially, was like, well, that seems like a lot. Now I'm already thinking that's not a lot. That's going to be the average, not just at Kansas State, but everywhere. Purdue just added their 11th transfer, last week. That's Purdue. If teams like Purdue are doing it, Kansas State's close to 10. I think Tennessee's close to, or maybe have added over 20 transfers. Wow. So, I mean, if teams are doing that, then you're going to see a chunk of high school recruiting disappear. So some of these ads that Kansas State's taking, the reason why sometimes they're not going to have the typical competition as they would is because teams aren't taking as many high school players in general.
One more question on Tobi, too, before we get off of this. He did have a Kansas offer, correct? Like, is it fair to say that's the first real head-to-head recruitment between Kleiman and Leipold?
Yeah, he did have a Kansas offer, and and I think it came from Lance Leipold. So I do think that was probably the first head-to-head battle, and it was kind of a slam dunk win for Chris Kleiman.